What's up, guys? My name's Nate and this is Heavy Pedal Garage. Today we're going to install a vintage air kit in this 75 Firebird. It's the SUREFIT series Generation 4 and it's already installed, so I can tell you guys that this is going to be a really fun project and I'm excited to show you how it works. It's a kit for the 70 to 81 Firebird, but Vintage Air makes kits for all different kinds of makes and models, and a lot of them are, that SureFit series is made to fit your vehicle, and they weren't kidding about that. This thing went in really, really easy. So when you buy this kit, you can get it with or without air conditioning. So I had air in the car before, so I ordered the Vintage Air kit with air conditioning, and everything plugs in. You use your factory vent locations for air conditioners, and if you order the kit without AC, the center louvers for your air conditioning will go into the center console in that little pocket down here by the shifter. If it's a manual transmission, there's a little center louver that mounts up underneath your ashtray, so you can probably put it wherever you wanted, but that's one of the main differences between the two. And the other thing I'll mention is if you have a car that currently does not have air conditioning, you're going to need a 3-groove pulley to go along with the kit, and that's an additional cost. So with the complete kit, it comes in several different boxes. The main components, which you can buy separately if needed, is the evaporator, which is sort of your air handler. It's got your heater core in it. This is the piece that's going to get mounted up under the dash. And there's the duct work that comes with that. It comes with all new ducts, are going to all be brand new, which is sweet because that plastic is pretty quick to break off on the original. The other major component is the condenser and dryer kit. So that'll include the hoses that you need, your number 10 and number 6 air conditioning hoses. You will have to supply your own heater hoses. Another major component of this system is the compressor and the bracket that goes with it. Now this bracket's going to come unpainted, so you should plan on doing that, but it just bolts right up to your Pontiac block. You also have an upgraded controller. So the original controls for your heat and AC were cables and vacuum operated, and this is going to come with all electronic. Everything in it is going to be sent by a signal via wire to your evaporator and your air handler. So there's no more of that sticking cable set up or the clips that break and your thing doesn't work properly. So of course another thing to plan for is, in order to get everything to fit under the dash, they send you a new plastic insert for your glove box. So the factory glove box compartment will actually be removed. Just a few screws to take that out, and you'll insert a new one in there. It's actually just a little bit shorter to give room for the AC and heat evaporator up underneath of there. The only modification that I had to make to get this SureFit kit to work in this car was I had to cut just a little groove into the core support. Easy place to access. I just used a cutoff wheel, but you could use a Sawzall or a hand hacksaw to make this cut. It just needed to be grooved out a little bit to make room for the stainless steel lines that run from your dryer to your number 10, number 6 air conditioning hoses. There are other aftermarket air conditioning kits out there that you can look at, shop around, see what you think. But I picked this kit up for a little over $1,600, and I felt that was pretty comparable to doing a full actual rebuild of my factory AC. It had set open, the lines were cut, the compressor was busted, the box looked terrible up under the engine compartment, under the hood. So you throw all those things together, I decided to go with this and have a nice clean appearance up under the hood. And I'm really happy with it, so let's get this video rolling and I'll show you how this all goes together. Okay, so we have our condenser kit, and the first part of the instructions says to go ahead and put together your dryer and the bracket setup that goes onto the condenser. So here we go. Okay, so we have our bracket here, and we have our dryer, and you'll note on the dryer itself it says which way the flow goes. So basically we just want to insert that into here with the flow pointing in that direction. Good deal. Okay, now we just need to get this bracket pushed down over that threaded bolt. Put your 1/4-inch nut on that's got the star washer. And we're just going to get it started on there, and we're going to leave this loose because in the next steps we're going to hook up some hoses, and we want that loose to get our alignment right. Okay, for the next step it just says basically we mount this bracket to the condenser using these threaded pieces, threaded bolts in the tabs on the condenser. Jack's got that positioned. I got my 2 nuts with star washers. We'll thread those on. And we can snug these down because I don't think this bracket position is going to impact any of the other fitment. And that is a 3/8 socket. We're just going to snug them down and call it good. Now we've got our number 6 rings and our number 6 piece of plumbing. So we're just going to put a little bit of supplied lubrication on there. Okay, I'm going to do this side. You want to grab me that other ring, Jack?
Yep.
Okay. Number 6 O-rings installed. Alright, so now we've double checked our dryer to make sure that the inside is pointing toward the condenser. And we're going to gingerly get those seals in there and tighten this down. This is a 3/4 nut, by the way. And then this one, this is why you leave this loose in the bracket, because it needs to move around a little bit. Grab your 3/4-inch wrench there, Jack.
Am I tightening it or loosening it?
You were right. Start up here.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, just snug. Put a little torque on it. Now go ahead and do your one up here by the dryer.
Oh, I'm loosening it. Snug.
Good deal. Okay, now we'll tighten up this one to secure the bracket for the dryer, and we're done with that part. Alright, so we already got the radiator out. If you're worried about that, it's really not that bad to take a radiator out. There's a handful of bolts on your fan shroud at the top, a couple at the bottom, 4 bolts to take your fan off the pulley, pull that out, and then pull your bottom hose, your transmission lines, and your top hose, drain out the coolant, and then the whole shroud and everything just lifts right out the top. Without having the grills in, it's going to make this really easy. Core support, basically the mounting hole is this one down here and this one up here. Okay, so we have the driver's side bracket, supplied bolts with the washers. Okay, so we'll just feed this in here. And you got your bottom hole in the core support and the top. Just like that, and then we'll put the nuts on from inside the engine compartment. Alright, so the nuts, here's your battery compartment. Jack's holding the other head of this bolt. So right there's one, and the other one is going to be down there. So they're both accessible near your battery component. We'll get those tightened up, bracket installed. You hold it?
Yep, what?
Okay, so now I'm going to get my ratchet on there and we'll tighten it.
I'm holding it. Oh, but not anymore. Okay, no. Oh, is that bad?
No, hold it.
I have been doing it like...
Yeah, you're fine. Let's get the bottom one started.
Just swinging everywhere.
Yep. And that'll help keep it from swinging. Okay, so you are going to have to turn it. Righty tighty. Push in and turn.
Push in and turn?
Yeah, towards me and turn it. Does it feel like it's turning?
Yep.
Nice, you got it. It's definitely a 2-person job. Alright, now that we got our driver's side bracket installed for the condenser, just fish this thing down in there, nice and easy. Okay, we got it hung on the driver's side bracket here, and we'll get our nuts finger tightened on the driver's side, and then we can put the passenger side bracket onto the core support. Okay, so we just got our nuts with the star washers attached finger tight to hold up that side, and then on this side we've got our support bracket that's going to mount right in there on the top bolt for the passenger side of this condenser bracket, the side with the dryer. So all that'll get bolted together first. So we got that one going. So then we just got to work down here by the frame rail to get the bottom part of this bracket bolted in, and then that should be installed. All right, so there's both mounting locations. And we left those loose per instructions because now we need to fish the next tube through there. Okay, so now we're going to install the grommet in the core support for our number 6 hardline. And it goes right beside the bracket we just installed. Okay, so we got our number 6 hardline that was in the kit. And I'm not going to put the O-ring on yet until I feed it through this grommet we just installed. Just like that. Okay, so now we're on the other side of that number 6 hard line. Again, this is like so much easier with these grills out. I couldn't imagine trying to work in here with having those in the way. We got our number 6. So now we can install that into the dryer. Alright, so now we got our number 8 line, O-ring lubricated. We're going to go install that on the condenser and get our 2 Adel clamps hooked up onto our bracket, which is right there. And then it'll end up being something like that when we're done. So the instructions did note some models you might have to clearance. So I just used my whiz wheel and cut a little bit out of that part of the core support. Got everything going there. 7/8 to tighten down your number 8s, your number 8 tubes. Put my binary switch in, and that is the end of the condenser install. So we're going to get the radiator and fan shroud and fan button back up and move on to the next part. Okay, now we got the condenser kit in. I got the radiator and the hoses all hooked back up, the transmission lines. Everything we took apart has been put back together. I got to looking at it, and I think maybe if I would have taken the lower valence off, I might have been able to sneak that whole condenser kit up through and then install the bracket on the passenger side and mount it from up underneath without having to take the radiator out. But I don't know. It was easy enough to take that out. I guess all I'm out is some coolant, so no big deal. But what we're going to do now is move into the installation kit itself and get the evaporator hooked up and all of that good stuff. So we're going to start by getting the fresh air cap installed on the Firewall. In the Vintage Air kit instructions, it talks about needing to remove the wheel well to be able to get access to your air vent hole, which is right there. And what you need to put in there is your plate with your grommets that your lines and hoses go through. So I'm thinking instead of taking the wheel well off, I can just reach in there, get that done, feed my hoses through, and have all that together so that I can put my air extractor on and not have to remove the wheel well. That would be so awesome. So let's try it out. Got my installation kit bag laid out here for the most part. Got my fresh air cap, and we just need to put the grommets in there. Okay, now that we got the grommets in, I just wanted to explain. Originally, I felt like this would be recessed into the Firewall, but it's not. It actually goes like a hat, like a cap over top of the hole, the cutout that's in your Firewall. So Fits right over like that. We're going to put a bead of RTV around there. You got your 1/4 inch bolt that's 1.5 inches long. This bracket's actually threaded. This goes inside of the car, up in your fresh air vent area, and they sandwich together like that. Pretty straightforward. We'll get the RTV on there and get it installed. Okay, so you're looking from inside the engine compartment. This is my air extractor. Sneak that bad boy in there just like that. Give it a little twist to make sure that sealant's good. And there we go. Cool thing is, if you're doing this by yourself, that sealant holds it on there while you can go inside the car and get your bolt threaded in. Okay, so from inside the car here, your kick panel, fresh air vent, there's plenty of room to spin that bracket around to get it started. So that's what I've done. Now I just need to tighten that 1/4 inch bolt down and it'll be done. So yeah, just so you know, one of the other non-conventional things that is happening here is I've blocked off my firewall with a custom plate. It's a turkey roaster pan. So I actually did a video on that if you want to see how that worked out. But I'm not putting these plugs in. I don't need them. I closed up all those holes. So if you're doing this, you're going to end up doing that, as well as using the block off plate that comes with this kit to seal up your original HVAC opening in your firewall. All right, so we've been running hoses. Got 5/8 heater hose, which you'll need. Get plenty of length. I'll tell you what the measurement on that ends up being after I'm done. But you got your number 10 and your number 6. So the straight end on the 6 comes out to the engine compartment, and then the hooked end with your valve on the 10 comes out. So up under the fender, over the wheel well, and then this little trick here, I was able to feed those in. Now, I will say that this number 10 was a bear to get in. I ended up having to pop the grommet out, put the hose through the grommet, the hose through the fresh air cap, and then I had to fidget that grommet in with a screwdriver to get it back in the cap. I did not like that. So everything kind of comes out right here through your fresh air down by the kick panel, and just got those staged there. I've got one more heater hose to run. I bought 11 feet of 5/8. So I'm gonna stop running hoses and switch to the box that goes inside of here. That way I know how much hose I need, so I can cut the end off of the other side and use the rest of that 5/8 hose for my second heater hose line. All right, before we can get this mounted, we got some bench prep to do. One of the things I like about the instructions in this kit is the instructions tell you to mount this bracket 644023 to the back of this case. So the picture kind of shows you what the bracket looks like, but they've labeled them. So 644023, we just need to use the bolts that are in the supplied case. And just get those going. Okay, definitely tighten up this top one first. The bottom one that I'm doing now is slotted, so that'll help you get this top one snug down and adjust the bracket so that it all fits. So got that done. Now the next thing we need to do is just put our 5/8 hose nipples on. These are for the heater hoses. And again, as with all of the O-rings in this kit, it appears that we need to get some lube on them. So this case is pressurized. On quite a few of these caps, you've got the plastic cap over top, but then there's a rubber cap underneath. So make sure you remove both. In a lot of these pieces, like the dryer, the condenser, in this case, when you pull that first plug, psst, you get a little bit of compressed air. So Okay, that one was a little bit of a booger. Need to use some needle nose. But now I've got both my nipples with lubricated O-rings. Just get those on there and tighten them down. So in order to tighten these down, this is a 7/8 on your brass fitting. And then these bigger nuts are 1 1/16, which 1 1/16 is the same size as your number 10. So we're going to just snug these down. Should be good. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and put the front mounting bracket on as well. So we have the case spun around, and these two bolts were already in the case itself. So we'll just get those in there finger tight for now, because when we get this into the car, we're going to have to fit everything up. And I've got a unique challenge that I'm going to show you here. Okay, so the unique issue is that I blocked off my firewall. So of course, I did not plan for this and didn't mark holes in original factory places where this Vintage Air was supposed to mount. So anyways, I had one bolt hole left. I marked it with silver. I had filled it, but at least I could use that as a reference. And I used my block off plate, just held it up there and marked a few holes, and then drilled a hole and put the bolt through there to hang that back bracket of this case. So I held it up there and it looked pretty good. Everything kind of matches where it should be. So I guess if it doesn't completely work out and I need clearance, I'll just take it apart and drill another hole. We'll make it work. But I'm going to go ahead and get this firewall cleaned up, get my insulation put up on there before I get this case hung. And then we can get the hoses hooked up. Okay, got the firewall done in. Got our soundproofing. And for heat, I did a double layer of this 3M closed cell foam. So we got that all cleaned up. I got the cover started on my hoses. And the grommets are in 3 of the holes. The 2 heater hoses and this number 6 AC line are super easy to thread through. But what I'm about to show you, I learned from Billy over on Vintage Air's YouTube channel. It's not in the book, and this is a tip that you're going to want to use. Your number 10 does not want to fit through the grommet very easily. I mean, look at that. It's just so tight. So what you want to do is thread this on first before you put it through the panel. Make sure your covers stay on. You don't want any contaminants in there. Okay, once your grommet is through, leave it on the small part of the metal hose. And then go ahead and run it through your fresh air cap. Now, when you go to install the grommet, leave it right here on the small part of this metal line. The first one I did, I tried to fish the grommet onto the panel while it was on this part of the hose. I got it done, but it took me a while. It was nearly impossible. And this works way easier. When you put your grommet into the panel, keep it on this short part of the hose. So there you go. The grommet's inserted. Now you can finish threading your hose through pretty easily. You can always lubricate these a little bit if you need to get them through. But now I'm going to put some RTV on my cap, get it installed with the screws that were provided in the kit. Now, if you're doing this the way the kit says, you should have your kick panel on before all of this happens. But I'm going to cut slits in the back of my kick panel so that I can insert it later and be able to take it off without having to undo all of this stuff. So that's what I'm going to do. You'll never see it back there. That's why I don't have my kick panel on now, but in the instructions you can see you're supposed to do that. So if you don't want to cut your kick panel or do something funky like that, make sure you put that on before you glue up your fresh air. Okay, now we got the case wrestled in here. Just need to put these hoses on, pay attention to which one goes where. So this hose that came through the lower fitting should go to your intake and your control valve, and the upper one goes straight to the water pump. So we're going to go ahead and get these hooked up first, and then we can mount our case. How many of y'all have put a hose on like this and forgot to put the clamp on before you inserted it? Luckily you can take these breeze bands apart. Is that what they're called, breeze bands? I know they're called worm clamps, but my dad always called them breeze bands. He was a mechanic in the Air Force, so maybe that's where that came from. I don't know. But at least they come apart and you can get them on. Make sure before you hang your box, your number 10 is out in front and out of the way. And I also suggest that you hook up your number 6 before you do the heater lines. It's not really that bad. It's not a big deal at all, but it just would be a little easier without having these hoses in the way when you go to tighten it. No big deal. All right, so we'll get her hung. Yep, I'm just gonna hold the box up and you
Ratchet.
tighten the ratchet, man. Are you ready?
Yeah. You got it?
Not yet.
Stop turning.
Okay.
Do you want me to go?
Yep.
Is it tightening?
Yeah.
Is it heavy?
Nope. Doing good. There you go. That's good.
More?
That's good. Nope, we're going to leave it a little loose. That way I can get everything adjusted in here, and once it's all set, then I'll tighten it down.
Okay.
Knuckle bump. That's all I need, bud. Thank you.
Go. Bye, Dad.
Hopefully I won't have to ask you to do that again. I think I got it this time.
Oh, mine.
So here's our number 10. Got our O-ring. Got to kind of get it all lined up. Get your electric wires out of the way. It's pretty tight. We'll just tighten it down. And snug. So the next step is to take this press tape and install it around the number 10 fitting we just did. Got our tape all on there. That wasn't too bad. And then this bracket took me quite a while. I end up having to slot these holes, so I just bored them out a little bit. This one here and this one here as well. And I wish, so I ended up using the top hole and used the nut instead of the bottom. Just to get everything leveled up, I had to kind of mess around with it. So I got a few extra holes up here that didn't quite work out, so I just covered them up with some of that soundproofing, but looks pretty good. So I've rethought this a little bit, and I didn't seal it with RTV or anything. I just have it screwed in because I think when I put my kick panel in, I'm going to want to pull this out and use it as sort of the trim that it should be. That's the way it's supposed to be. So if I glued this down and put my kick panel, it would have to go over top of it and I wouldn't have a trim ring. So what I'm going to do is just unscrew this when I go to install that panel. We'll slide the kick panel in, and then I think I'm going to make just like a rubber gasket or something like that, foam gasket, so that that seals up, and then we'll use something to fill that air gap there. So we're working out our vent hose here. So according to this, I added everything up. In the 2.5, you need 118 total. In the 2-inch, you need 72 total. And it just came with the 2-inch and the 2.5 all as one piece. So I'm going to cut this down. But when I measured it all out, without stretching it really hard, just kind of a moderate stretch, it still had room to go. There was plenty there with about a foot to spare. So I may add a little bit to each of these measurements just to give me a little extra and use up all this hose. That way I'll have some room to play if I need it. Okay, we got everything cut out. I was able to add 2 to 3 inches onto every measurement. So these are going to be the only ducts that we put together, and this is the defrost duct. And these other ones are going to have to wait until I get the dash done. But these are really easy. They've got the little hooks on the plastic to snap on. Just kind of bend that in and push it up on there. Just like that. Okay, to install these defrost ducts, pretty straightforward. I did have to clearance this hole a little bit to be able to get your number 10 screw through there. But you have the supplied bracket, and basically it just goes up underneath of there. You put your screw through, and the bracket goes underneath last. Tighten that up, do the other side, and we're good to go. So a couple quick thoughts on these. If your windshield is in, I'm sure you'd be able to get your duct secured. But one thing you might try is to put the nut inside of the vent. I had a little stubby screwdriver and it was still difficult to reach that. So if you had the nut on this side, you know, you could reach it from the bottom. But that might save you some time trying to wrestle that if you do already have your windshield in. So here's what they look like installed. And then the other quick point I was going to make is these come in the kit, but I ended up using some self-tappers. That'll save you some time too, especially if you're doing it by yourself. I held this up and was able to self-tap those with the other hand. So then according to the diagram, these ducts mount to the front of this case. So you've got a point here and here. So we'll get those attached. And there we go. So as I was mentioning, I'm not going to hook up any of these others because they all go to the dash vents. So it's kind of getting me motivated to do my dash next. So now we're going to drill the drain hose hole in the bottom of our firewall here. It says you just come an inch down from where your drain connection is. So we're going to make a mark right in here somewhere and get our hole. So just fish your hose through, connect it up to the drain fitting, just like that, and you're done. I didn't have a 5/8, which is what was called for. I used a 1/2 inch. It was pretty tight, but that's okay. It went in, and it's going to make a good seal. One of the things I noticed with this drain hose, though, watch where it comes through. If you have headers, you're going to either want to trim that off or tie this back. I'm going to go ahead and just trim that off right next to the frame rail so there's no chance of it burning on the header. It came with this elbow, so I plan on inserting that in there and then using the excess to come off the bottom end and point that down past the frame rail. Before we install the compressor, there's a few things I want to go over. First of all, these two brackets and these spacers come in the kit and they're in bare metal, so you have to paint those. No big deal. And then I like to go through and lay out my hardware so when I'm fumbling around I don't have to jumble and find which bolts are correct. So got my ruler to measure. But anyways, this is how this bracket is going to go on. Without a smog pump, you're going to use these 3-inch bolts. And they are going to go through the two portions of this bracket that have those spacers there. This bolt here is a 1 1/4. It'll go through and mount to the head back there. And then this one will come up through and mount to the bottom correctly. And then for this without the smog pump deal, you're going to use these 1/2 inch spacers. So looking at the head here, your first 3-inch brackets are going to mount to this bottom hole, and then these two here, and then you have this little dog ear where that bottom bolt will go in. Saw that coming. So moving on, once that's installed, you've got your bracket here. This will go on using this 1-inch bolt with a flat washer, and there's a provision in this bracket that is threaded, so you won't need a nut to go along with that. And then finally, you just install the compressor on the outside of this bracket, it looks like. So the bolts go through the compressor and then through this bracket. And you're going to use your 1.5" with a lock nut, a 2" and another 1.5". So when you're getting ready to mount your compressor, make sure that this is rotated on the slot all the way towards your inner fender. If you've got it rotated the other way, you might have some obstruction with your head. So as far as putting this thing in, you've got your hose mounts up top, and then on mine I have A, B, and whatnot, some letters on these dog ears. A, this one points, this dog ear points straight up, and then you're going to use the ones, this one's got a 16 and a B to actually mount it. And remember, your compressor dog ears go in front of the black bracket. Put your 1.5" through, and then it'll just kind of hang there. And then your other 1.5" goes through this part of that bracket. And then it's going to be hard to see, but your 2" goes through the bracket and passes through the other bracket underneath here. And that's what this whole adjustment mechanism rotates on, is this 2" bolt down here. Just look at your diagram if you have questions. And then the last amount of hardware is your oil dipstick holder, and that's everything you're going to need. This is what holds it, this is what mounts that clamp together, and this is what puts the clamp onto your engine. Okay, so your number 10 comes out from underneath your fender. So we're going to kind of do the same thing, just get that tube pushed down in here, get our cap, and just hand thread it on. But be careful with this number 10 and how you route it, because a certain way could really get it tied in with the belt, and we don't want that. There we go. We certainly don't want to cross thread that. So turn it backwards a couple times until you're sure that you're lined in, and then hold your hose just right so you don't have pressure on that nut while you're spinning it, and that way you can feel if it's cross threaded. So to get this one tightened, it's going to be an 1 1/16. If you don't have that, crescent wrench will work. I'm going to turn that a little bit more so it doesn't hit that bolt. And of course, when we adjust it for the belt, we'll have to take another look at everything. Make sure we're not having any impact. So just the last couple words on this. I had factory AC before, so I already have the 3-grooved pulley. If you did not have AC, you're going to need to replace that pulley. It says a 57 or 58" belt. I have no idea if 57, 58 is the stock length for the factory AC, but it'd be alright. I'd be getting a new belt anyways. And then the dipstick holder, I'm not going to be installing that because later on I'm probably going to put an aftermarket dipstick in, and you can see right now it's tucked way down in there, so I really don't need it. So for wiring this vintage air system, this is all the wiring that comes in the kit. So I'll tell you guys, I have a sickness. I actually enjoy the wiring part of any of these projects. What's cool about it is when I first looked at the bag and when I look at the wire harness under the car, I'm like, oh my gosh, am I going to be able to figure this out? It's kind of worrisome, kind of panicky. But what I like about the process is just fine-tuning, honing in, dialing in on what each little thing is. You can't focus on the whole nest of wires. That'll bug you out. What you got to do is just bore in one wire, one color, one place where it goes. That's it. You do that, you'll be in good shape. This really isn't that bad. Pretty much what I did is I sat down at the table with some coffee and just went through the wire diagram. This one here in the instructions, don't really pay attention to it. The one that really is helpful is this one. And to help you interpret this, it took me a minute to figure it out. But wire harness, okay, so what they're saying is this dark line here is the whole harness. And then this where it says firewall, this is where the wire harness passes through the firewall. So everything on this side is inside of your cab, and everything on this side of the firewall is outside. And then there is a note that says this heater connection can be either inside or outside. I'm going to put mine inside to help protect that, and I'll do the ground inside. So that will help you follow it along. And as you're coming off of the wire harness, it tells you here's violet, that needs to go to a switched source. So in the wire harness, there's plenty of places that you can connect into switched. And then also in the fuse block, you could tie in there for switched. So what I'm going to do is test the original heater controls that I have and see if there's something in there that's switched. But we'll find a spot for that. And then the dash light is this tan, and that goes to the control that came with Vintage Air, the little slider controls. And there's a bulb that came in these Firebirds that lit up the original controls. So what I'm going to do is use that original bulb wire to connect this tan into. The gray isn't used, and then all the rest, as they come off of the harness, you can see here where they go. Sat down with some coffee, followed that wire harness guide that I just showed you, had some tape, and I wired everything up. These connectors go to the evaporator box. Following along the harness, okay, like I said, it shows you where things fall out. So here's the purple and tan wire. This will be for your dash lights, which I'm going to connect into the original dash light bulb for the original controls. This will go to a switched source. We've got the red and green here, which connects into your heater control. And then there's the white that I'm going to ground inside the firewall. This is that connection that'll happen inside instead of outside. It's for that little heater control unit to control the fluid going into your evaporator. Following the harness along, you've got this little block here, which is your fuse block. So this whole jumble, it's basically 4 wires. So what you have here is a red wire that's thicker. It goes to your positive battery terminal. And then you have 2 white wires, which go to your negative on the battery terminal. And then this blue wire is the binary safety switch. So the blue comes out of the harness further down the line from behind the firewall items. So I'm going to simply unwrap this tape or cut this tape right here, and I'm going to bring this blue wire, which is your binary safety switch wire, back, and I'm going to run it out the same hole that I use for my heater control, because the dryer where the binary switch is on the passenger side, which is the same place that the heater control is. So we're going to run that blue wire kind of through the fender, the same path that the number 6 and number 10 took to get over to the condenser, and that's where the blue wire is going to go. So then I'm going to bring the white wires and the red wires over to the driver's side of the compartment of the cab and bring those out in a neat little spot that I found to get them over to the battery, because the battery's on the driver's side. So I'm going to sit down now and figure out how I want to actually run these in the car, and I'll bring you back around when I got my path figured out. Underneath the brake pedal, just below the fuse block, which is right up here, fuse block, underneath this padding, there's a hole. And in that hole was this rubber grommet. And I drilled a hole in the grommet. So we're going to run our red and white wires out there. And it comes out right down there, just under the brake booster to the left of the fuse block connector. And there we go. Shoved it through, poked the grommet back in, and then this fuse block, this little fuse here, we'll figure out a way to get it mounted up, tie it all up. Same with the rest of these wires. Once we get the dash installed, we'll figure out how we're going to hang everything. Okay, so we'll get this all sized up when we're ready and make our connection. Future video, I'm going to go through all these wire harnesses and show you the plugs and what they connect to. We'll get that all ran here. But so red and white comes through the dash, up around. Don't get tied up with your pedal there, but it's going to come up and over. And then this part of the harness is where everything broke out. So we've got our tan for the lights and the purple for switched. So we'll get those set up here in a little bit. And then my green and red for the heater control, heater pump control. That's going to come over to here, tie in with my blue. And then we're going to get a place underneath the here with the grommet that came with the kit to be able to hook up that heater control valve and also run the blue wire out to be able to get on over to the binary switch. And then lastly, here was another one of the plugs that came in the harness. So I got everything kind of tucked up behind the bracket, and then when it's all said and done, I'm going to figure out where to mount this. I want it accessible, so it may end up just hanging underneath the dash, and I'll zip tie it under the dash somewhere. Same with the rest of this. It will all get kind of buttoned up nice and neat when the dash goes in. But let's get this hole drilled, and we'll fish the heater control plug into the cab from outside. Again, I want it connected inside. And then we'll fish the blue wire out and run it along the 6 and 10 and the heater hoses to get over to the control switch. And then I think what I'm going to do with this ground is probably come up behind the blower motor there, and I ended up using a nut. So I think my ground can just go right in there with that nut. Alright, so we're pretty good on that. That went really well. Just got that grommet in there. The blue wire as well. There's your green and red connector for the heater valve. So that's what we look like on this side coming out through the grommet. You know, I just got a blue wire laying there, but it'll get tucked up in. Won't be able to see it. It comes through the fender, out and around. We'll tuck it back up underneath, up in here. Come on around through the firewall into the binary switch. The other wiring we got going on is this other little blue wire that came with the kit. That goes to the binary switch, fed it back through, and it's going to come around. We'll tuck it in down in here, maybe a little black wire loom action if we need to, but it connects to the black on the compressor. So coming out of this under dash harness, there was a gray wire, and it had this bulb in it, and that was the original light that went to the original controls. So what a great place for the tan. So I'm going to hang on to this in case I ever go back, which I probably won't, but it's there. Got the ducts mounted up. Put some zip ties on there just to be safe. Hold it on nice and good. The only one that I haven't done is this one. It goes on the brace that attaches to the steering column mount. So I'll install that separately. And we're going to put the dash in. So there's the controls all installed. And I tell you what, the blower on this thing is no joke. Looking forward to seeing how that works. But I'm sure it's going to do a great job. Only real complaint, it's not even a complaint, the factory gauges, the way they light up versus how bright this is. It's not really an eyesore, but it's definitely noticeable. I think eventually I'm going to upgrade this to an Intellitronics gauge set, and it's going to be kind of an LED look, sort of circa mid-80s, late 70s, early 80s, mid-80s look. And the brightness will match. There are ways that you can also get your gauges to brighten more. You can get LED bulbs, you can take apart the gauge cluster and paint the inside to be a little more reflective. But in all, this all went really well here as far as getting these controls in. I think the louvers and everything look great in the dash. No problems there. The ductwork is really smooth up underneath. And it's just a really clean fit and a seamless transition from the factory air to this new setup here. So vintage air, absolutely. What a fun little kit to put together. I mean, it really was a plug and play system. The hardest things about this was literally just feeding the hoses through. And remember the little trick I told you about the grommet? Make sure on those number 10 hoses you get the grommet over top of the silver part of the fitting. That made my life a lot easier. And then really the other hardest part was just kind of getting the box leveled where I wasn't using the factory firewall hole provision getting everything leveled up, and then reaching up in the dash after I had the dash on to put the tubes onto the box. It really wasn't that hard. It's just, you know, you got to get your hands in there and get those things squeezed down on. Use a pair of needle nose. Have needle nose with a hook in them that I was able to reach in and grab the edge of that tube and kind of pull it down over the fitting on the box. So really, other than that, props to Vintage Air. Reason I went with it again is because the cost of this was going to be similar to rebuilding the factory AC correctly to use new modern refrigerant. The system had been set for so long, everything was open, it wasn't closed, so I'm sure all the seals and stuff were bad, so I went with Vintage Air. Cleans up the firewall, a lot of pros to using that system. The only other real things that are left to do are going to be to take it to a HVAC professional and have it vacuumed out and recharged. We'll do that once the car's back on the road. Check out the next video where I reupholster the dash, and then the video after that is going to be putting the dash and all the electrical components back together in there. So stick around, stay tuned. I love each and every one of you guys. Thanks for checking it out. Catch me next time.